Imagine you are negotiating a salary in a second language. You have practiced all the right vocabulary. You know your professional worth.
Right, you are completely prepared for the meeting.
Exactly. But then, right in the middle of your sentence, you use the word although instead of however.
Oh, that is a subtle but massive shift.
It really is. Suddenly, your powerful demand sounds like an incomplete, confusing thought. The words that connect our ideas are, well, they are the invisible gears of language.
Mm-hmm.
In English, we call these words conjunctions. They are the essential bridge that allows a learner to move from making basic, isolated sentences to expressing deeply complex thoughts.
And I would add that the mastery of those connecting words is often the exact dividing line between a beginner and a truly advanced speaker. I mean, you just cannot build a sophisticated argument without them.
You really cannot. So today, we are asking a very specific question regarding how English language learners should master these critical connecting words.
A highly debated question, too.
Very much so. Is it more effective to avoid formal grammar study and learn through natural dialogue, or is explicit memorization of grammatical categories absolutely essential for fluency?
Right.
I argue that focusing on natural dialogue and the organic function of words is the most effective way for learners to master conjunctions without the heavy burden of formal grammar rules.
And I take the opposing view. I argue that explicitly categorizing conjunctions provides an essential, reliable framework. Non-native speakers need this structural architecture to confidently construct complex sentences without relying on constant guesswork.
Well, I view language primarily as a practical tool for human connection. Its ultimate purpose is casual, flowing, natural conversation.
Sure, yes.
When a learner relies heavily on formal grammar study, that study can paralyze them. Think about the mental process of speaking in real time.
Okay.
If you are sitting across from a friend at a coffee shop and you are trying to remember abstract terms like subordinating conjunctions before you open your mouth, you will freeze.
Well, initially maybe.
The rhythm of the conversation will leave you behind completely. So instead of memorizing grammar categories, learners should focus purely on the meaning of the words and how they feel in a sentence.
How they feel.
Yeah, how they feel. By listening to native speakers and mimicking their patterns, the brain naturally absorbs the flow.
Look, natural dialogue is absolutely the end goal. A fluent, effortless conversation is what every learner wants. We do not disagree on the destination.
Okay, good.
However, we fundamentally disagree on the vehicle used to get there. Explicit structural knowledge is actually the fastest and, frankly, the safest path to achieve that natural flow.
The fastest? Really?
Absolutely. Without formal grammar study, learners are quite literally left guessing. They hear a connecting word in a rapid conversation, and they try to infer its exact rules from context alone.
Which humans are naturally good at doing.
But that method is highly prone to error. By categorizing conjunctions into specific, defined groups, we provide clear rules that can be repeated. These rules remove the anxiety of guessing.
I'm not so sure it removes the anxiety.
It does. A non-native speaker trying to link complex ideas needs this architecture. Formal grammar provides the blueprint so they can speak with total confidence rather than just, hoping the listener understands them.
I hear your point about architecture, but I have to question how practical that architecture is in the middle of a fast-paced conversation.
It is very practical.
I know you place a significant amount of value on acronyms and specific grammar groupings to build this blueprint.
I do, yes, because acronyms provide a reliable safety net for the learner. Take the category known as coordinating conjunctions.
Right, a very heavy turn.
It is a heavy grammatical term, sure, but the concept is foundational. These are words that connect two items of equal grammatical rank. To teach this concept quickly, we use the formal acronym FANBOYS.
Meaning for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so.
Exactly. Teaching this acronym is incredibly effective. It gives a non-native speaker a definitive, closed list. There are only 7 words in this specific category.
7 words, right.
When a learner memorizes fanboys, their confidence accelerates rapidly. They know exactly which 7 words to use to join 2 independent thoughts perfectly.
Hold on, before we go further, I want to make sure every listener is following this clearly. When you say these words connect items of equal grammatical rank, what does that actually mean when someone is speaking?
Oh, that is a great question. It means connecting 2 things that match perfectly in their structure. You use a fanboy's word to connect a noun to a noun, like apples and oranges.
Okay.
Or you use it to connect a full, complete sentence to another full, complete sentence. For example, I wanted to go to the park, but it started to rain. Both sides of the word but are complete, equal thoughts.
Right. I see why you value that clarity. But let me give you a different perspective on using an acronym like fanboys in practice.
Go ahead.
Doesn't focusing on a memorized checklist cause learners to mentally pause? I mean, they want to connect 2 ideas in a fast conversation, and suddenly they must run through a mental filing cabinet.
A mental filing cabinet?
Yes, they stop and calculate their speech. F is for, A is for and by the time they find the correct letter in the corresponding word, the conversation has already moved on.
Well, I think that...
They're calculating a math problem rather than speaking fluidly.
But that calculation phase is entirely temporary. It is exactly like riding a bicycle with training wheels.
Training wheels can be clunky, though.
Yes, in the very beginning, the learner might pause to recall the acronym, but that conscious, deliberate recall quickly becomes a subconscious habit. The framework prevents them from making embarrassing structural mistakes while they are building that long-term habit.
I am still not convinced by that line of reasoning, because knowing the practical function of a word is infinitely more important than knowing its category label.
The label matters.
Does it? In a natural dialogue, a learner only needs to know that the word but introduces a contrast or a difference. Knowing that but shows a shift in direction is valuable.
Right, but thought.
The label itself is useless in conversation.
The label is not useless. The label matters immensely because it dictates the underlying mechanics of the sentence, specifically punctuation and rhythm.
Punctuation is written, not spoken.
When you connect 2 full sentences with a fanboy's conjunction, the rule states you must put a comma before it. If a learner only learns that but means contrast, they never learn the mechanics of how to properly pace or build the sentence.
I still think pacing can be learned by listening.
But I will concede that a learner might eventually figure out a simple word like but through context alone. However, natural dialogue completely collapses when the sentence requires a strict mathematical pair of words.
Ah.
This brings us to a much more complex area: correlative conjunctions.
You were talking about the multi-word structures.
Exactly. These are conjunctions that require strict, mandatory pairs. You must always use the word either with the word or.
Right.
You must always use neither with nor. You have not only paired with but also. And then you have even more advanced pairs, like scarcely paired with when.
Those are definitely tricky for learners.
My argument is that without formal explicit study, a learner will naturally mismatch these pairs because natural dialogue moves too fast to catch them.
Why do you believe they will naturally mismatch them?
Humans are excellent at recognizing patterns.
Because the ear alone cannot reliably predict the second half of the structure.
Imagine a learner hears someone begin a sentence with the word hardly.
Okay?
How can their ear possibly predict that the connecting word arriving later in that sentence absolutely must be the word when? For example, hardly had I sat down when the phone rang.
Well, they hear the whole sentence.
But in a natural conversation, native speakers talk very quickly. They slur words together. A learner might hear hardly and just guess that the logical connection should be then or and.
Sure, mistakes happen.
Explicit grammar instruction forces the learner to memorize the specific pair. Hardly always goes with when. You cannot learn that mathematical precision reliably just by listening to fast-paced conversations.
That is a very compelling scenario, but I would frame the solution differently. I completely acknowledge the rigidity of these pairs. They are a package deal.
Very much so.
But I insist that they can be learned simply as natural vocabulary chunks. A learner does not need to study the abstract, intimidating concept of a correlative conjunction. Let me offer an analogy to explain how organic learning handles this.
I am listening.
These conjunction pairs are not individual words. They are bookends.
Bookends?
Yes, like the heavy objects you place on both sides of a row of books to keep them standing up straight. If a learner is building a sentence to show a choice, they place a bookend on the left side of their thought with the word either.
Okay.
By doing that, they're making a natural promise to the listener that they will place the exact matching bookend on the right side with the word or. Without the second bookend, the books fall over.
The structure collapses.
Exactly. The sentence falls over. A learner does not need to read a grammar textbook to understand this. Context and natural exposure are enough. They hear native speakers say, either we go now or we stay home. The learner absorbs the entire phrase as one complete, inseparable action.
Your bookends analogy is beautiful, but it assumes the learner has already correctly identified the matching bookend just by watching someone else use it from far away.
They usually do.
Often, a learner places either on the left side and then accidentally grabs nor for the right side because the words sound vaguely similar.
Well, sure, or and nor sound similar.
Explicit study hands them the correct bookend immediately. Why force a learner to wait for months of random conversational exposure just to finally figure out that neither always goes with nor? We can simply teach them the rule on day one and save them months of confusion.
Because conversational exposure corrects those slight errors over time, naturally. Furthermore, I can prove that formal study is not required for these complex structures.
Oh, really?
Yes. Let us look at highly conversational pairs that textbooks almost never teach. Consider the structure starting with what with, paired with and.
Ah, that is quite an informal structure.
It is, but it is a correlative pair. It acts just like the others. For example, what with the rain and the heavy traffic, I was late for work.
Right.
This is a mandatory pair. It requires what with at the beginning and in the middle. Yet, this pair is highly conversational. Learners almost never encounter it in a formal grammar classroom.
That is fair.
They pick it up purely through natural dialogue and exposure. This proves that complex, strict pairs can absolutely be mastered through organic listening without explicitly memorizing the category.
I see your point regarding casual phrases, but I do not believe the exception should define the rule.
It is not just an exception. It is how language works.
Just because one obscure informal pair can be picked up organically does not mean we should abandon the structural teaching of the most fundamental pairs.
All right.
But if we zoom out from these specific pairs, the sheer volume and nuance of advanced grammar rules becomes the real battleground. This is where formal study shows its true undeniable value. Let us look at two very advanced categories:
Prepare yourselves.
subordinating conjunctions and conjunctive adverbs.
To a language learner, those two terms sound incredibly intimidating.
They sound intimidating, but they represent very common words. Subordinating conjunctions include words like because, since, although, unless, and provided that.
Right.
Now, compare those to conjunctive adverbs. Those include words like however, therefore, moreover, and consequently.
If you are a learner simply trying to communicate, those two groups of words sound virtually identical in their practical purpose. I mean, they both just transition a thought.
Exactly. That is precisely the danger I am pointing out. To a learner who is only listening to natural dialogue, the word although and the word however might seem completely identical in meaning.
Because they both introduce a contrast.
Right, they both introduce a contrasting idea. If a learner just relies on their ear, they will assume these words are perfectly interchangeable. But grammatically, they connect sentences in entirely different structural ways.
Because one word makes a clause dependent, and the other word connects two independent thoughts.
Yes, but let us explain what that actually means for the learner. It means you can say, although it was raining, we walked to the store. The word although attaches to the rain and makes it a background detail.
Correct.
But you absolutely cannot say, however it was raining, we walked to the store. That is a massive structural failure. Advanced transitions, like furthermore or however, require explicit instruction because of the mechanics involved.
You're talking about punctuation again.
I am talking about the logic of the language. A conjunctive adverb like however is connecting two massive, heavy, complete thoughts. A tiny little comma is just a small breath. It is a weak piece of tape.
A weak piece of tape.
Yes. It is not strong enough to hold those two massive independent ideas apart. You need a heavier piece of punctuation, a semicolon, to act as a sturdy wall between those two thoughts. A subordinating conjunction does not need that heavy wall.
But
natural dialogue will never, ever teach a learner the invisible rules governing although versus however.
I am sorry, but I have to push back strongly on this premise.
Be my guest.
You are grading spoken English with a written rubric. When we are speaking to one another, the listener cannot hear a semicolon. You do not speak a semicolon.
Well, they hear the separation.
A listener hears a pause. They hear a shift in your tone of voice. If a learner naturally pauses between their thoughts, they have successfully communicated the grammar without ever needing to know the word semicolon.
But the structure,
the sheer volume of these advanced categories proves that formal study is completely overwhelming for someone whose primary goal is just speaking.
You call it overwhelming, I call it thorough.
It is overwhelming. Think about the massive lists we ask learners to memorize. First, we have coordinating conjunctions. Then we have subordinating conjunctions,
which are necessary.
Then we have advanced subordinating conjunctions like inasmuch as or supposing. Then we have conjunctive adverbs. Forcing a learner to memorize the mechanical difference between an advanced subordinating conjunction and a conjunctive adverb creates immense, unnecessary anxiety.
It is not about creating anxiety. It is about demanding precision.
But the primary goal of the language learner is simply to be understood by another human being.
Is that the only goal, though?
If a learner is at a party and says, "It was raining, however, we walked to the store," a native speaker understands them perfectly. Yes, a strict grammar teacher might draw a red circle around it on a piece of paper.
Because it is a run-on sentence.
But in a real conversation, the connection is successfully made. The meaning is clear. When we force learners to memorize these rigid academic categories, we make them terrified of speaking out loud.
I do not think terrified is the right word.
They are. They start worrying, wait, is furthermore an adverb or a conjunction? Where does the strong wall go? They freeze. We sacrifice their fluency for the sake of textbook perfection.
That is a passionate argument, and I understand why you want to protect the learner's confidence. But have you considered that lacking precision eventually creates a hard ceiling on their language ability?
What do you mean by a hard ceiling?
I mean that being simply understood at a casual party is a very low bar. Yes, they might survive a friendly chat without knowing the rules. But what happens when that same learner needs to write a professional email to a client?
Well, writing is different.
What happens when they are negotiating a legal contract? What happens when they are taking a university entrance exam? In those high-stakes environments, a missing semicolon or a misused however changes the entire tone of the communication.
I see your point.
It can make them look unprofessional. Categorization gives them the tools to master the language fully, not just survive a trip to the grocery store.
Professional fluency is highly important. Yes, I do not deny that. But my counterpoint is that you cannot reach professional fluency if you are too anxious to practice basic fluency first.
They are not mutually exclusive.
Approaching conjunctions as a natural, organic glue of informal conversation allows the learner to experiment safely. They can make mistakes. They can try putting the word because at the beginning of a sentence just to see how it feels.
Sure.
They can try using meanwhile to show time passing in a story. They learn by doing. They absorb the rhythm. They do not get bogged down by formal grammar rules that make them feel like they are failing a test every time they open their mouths.
I maintain that explicitly studying these categories does not hinder experimentation. It equips learners with the necessary architecture to experiment safely.
We will have to disagree on that safety.
Learning the Fanboys acronym is not a heavy burden. It is a rapid shortcut to success. Studying the bookends of correlative pairs, like not only paired with but also, is not paralyzing. It provides a reliable template they can use immediately.
I still prefer organic learning.
And understanding the mechanical difference between a conjunctive adverb and a subordinating conjunction allows a non-native speaker to speak and write with true authority. Without the rules, they are trying to build a complex house without a blueprint. Eventually, the house will collapse.
We have explored very different paths today regarding how the brain acquires language. But despite our disagreement on the method, I think there are clear points of convergence in our perspectives.
Well, I agree entirely. Regardless of whether a learner chooses organic dialogue or explicit grammar study, mastering these connecting words is an absolute non-negotiable requirement. A learner cannot stay at the level of basic, isolated sentences forever.
Absolutely. From a simple, common word like and to a highly complex transition like nevertheless. These words are mandatory for any learner who wants to elevate their English proficiency. They are the essential tools required for expressing complicated, nuanced human thoughts.
Nuance, logical argument, conditional statements, the passage of time, striking contrasts. None of these beautiful concepts can be clearly communicated without mastering conjunctions. We only disagree on the most efficient vehicle to transport the learner to that final mastery.
Reflecting on this debate, there is immense value in looking at language learning from multiple perspectives. Perhaps the most comprehensive approach to exploring the English language lies somewhere in the middle of our two arguments.
A middle ground.
Blending a deep respect for formal, structural rules with a strong focus on natural conversational flow might be the ideal strategy. A learner might use natural dialogue to build their initial comfort and reduce their anxiety, and then later use explicit grammar study to refine their precision when they need to reach that professional level.
That is a very fair and balanced synthesis. The structural grammar provides the reliable safety net, while the natural dialogue provides the forward momentum and the confidence to speak.
We will conclude our discussion here, leaving the ultimate choice to the listener. There is no single definitively correct method that works for every single human brain. Every learner must decide which approach best suits their own educational journey and cognitive style.
Very true.
But whatever path you choose, remember the power of the connection. You can gather the best vocabulary words in the world. You can know every noun and verb. But until you find the mortar to connect them, your most brilliant thoughts will remain disconnected.